and then after they explain with a paragraph, very briefly, the relationship or the professional relationship between the two people. Like he was my program officer for this project, or he was my postdoctoral advisor, and so forth, basically. Some people explain it as well, if there's a need.
Yeah, well, what if the person worked for you?
You mean for
Yeah, you were supervising, say, a...
that's what you say, because that person worked for me? Because that's the fact, right? I mean, so that's the other thing, on the CVs, we disclose all the facts, basically, all the factual, provable facts, basically. So we don't want to, I guess, inflate our resume for untrue statements. And also, behind those, names, like people call. Like for example, when I want to hire a postdoc or a faculty member, before the decision, I like to call the references to learn more about the person in terms of, is it a team person, can collaborate, can work in a group environment, how social skills are, because some of those things are important to bring someone into your group. So, and you usually don't really get those much of details in the reference letters,
So CV is usually more detailed as compared to your resume. I'm not sure how detailed the CV should be. Is there like a main scale for a typical PhD science major student?
Well, I don't think there's a typical length, because my guess is any of yours would be shorter than ours, kind of thing, and ours are probably very different from each other. But I think to me, the difference between a resume and a CV is the resume is typically a very kind of short and sweet, like a one-page kind of, these are the things I've done. The CV is, like Tanju mentioned just a second ago, it's kind of the everything I've done. So it has all your publications and all your presentations and, all your degrees and all of that kind of stuff in it. And so the CV typically, to me, is much longer, much more detailed than a resume. A resume is kind of a highlights kind of thing.
And I looked this up because I saw that as a potential question, and I've always used it interchangeably. So I thought, well, maybe it's time I knew the answer to this. I didn't get a clear answer, but here's what I learned, and you can add it into the other. The resume is shorter, but it is more professionally oriented toward maybe a job of sorts. The CV seems to be more academic in nature. So if you're looking for a job at a college or university, a CV with more explanations and the detail. But if you're going into business, industry, some other career, non-academe, they're wanting the short and sweet of the most important things that you are bringing to the table. There are going to be many more things they're going to look at, I'm sure. But it really is about that position, that job, not an academic job, but that in that business world. Short and sweet, clear and concise, a format that you carry through so that your document looks good, it looks sharp, and it stands out to someone, even down to the weight of the paper. And I put early on, I even thought cream was better than just white, right? You want someone in a stack of a Vita, a resume, you want them to pull yours out to say, well, look, this one's different. So those types of things to think about, again, what's going to make them pick up your document and take a closer look?
Now I'm a master's student in plant pathology, and after taking several classes of statistics, I found myself which is more interested in the data analysis related to agriculture science. So now I'm wondering if I want to apply for a PhD in data analysis, PhD field, what I should do in the next year, which is during my master's degree period, what experience I should get to get my resume more qualified for a PhD in applied statistics.
I would say, I mean, if you want to shift fields from plant pathology to statistics, I would encourage you to focus on that, you know, take a few more statistics courses, and make sure that in the application for the PhD program, that you really sell the fact that, you know, your interest has kind of shifted, as well as the background that you've been doing to prepare for a PhD program is maybe more statistically oriented than plant pathology oriented, although you want to tie in that the agricultural aspect of it. And so I would say kind of to emphasize the statistical things that you're doing now, whether you're changing your research focus a little bit to address some of that or include some of that more than you maybe had been originally, or you picked up extra classes in statistics and things. But I would go ahead and kind of highlight that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially if you're going to go for a PhD program. It would be nice to list some courses that you're taking and you receive good grades from those courses, so that your future advisor will look at those and will develop a confidence to hire or to offer you a PhD position.
A lot of CV submissions for jobs and things are online now. Are there certain things you take into consideration when sending someone your CV, like via email or something? For instance, should we make sure that it's saved like as a PDF? Is that the best way to save the CV, or are there any things to take into consideration technology-wise?
I personally like PDF for two reasons. I don't want the format changes because someone else will put an Apple or iPad or something. As much as possible to minimize the changes, number one. And number two is that hopefully it will not be changed by someone. It's a Word file or so forth. So therefore, that's my preference to send electronic as PDF.
I would agree with that because they don't shift, when you send them. But I'd make sure when you save it as a PDF, you look at it, because sometimes it'll shift there.
Definitely.
Right, if it's a Word document, you save it as a PDF, sometimes page breaks move around and things like that happen, make sure it looks like you want it to look. I think that's the best format.
Yeah, the letters are right for different individuals. I also send them as PDFs, so that there is at least some message that says this has come from me and it has not been changed at all. The extra kind of stamp of approval and support.
And also one other thing is, please print it and see how it looks when it's printed. And especially give someone else to see and read it. So therefore, sometimes, like personally, I don't like some forms to read. I mean, it's just not appealing to me. So therefore, really, and also, I think 12 is the minimum. Sometimes people prefer other. So just to make sure that when it's printed, it's really, because sometimes, on your screen, you enlarge it and you see larger, easily work, no problem, but make sure that it looks when it's printed.
I think Kenna kind of started off the session with the best piece of advice when she told you about the center, the Michelin Career Center, to get advice. You need to ask yourself how many people have looked at your materials before you send them off, especially the first times. How many different eyes, maybe other than your own. If I've worked on something a long time, I no longer see little defined details that someone else might look at. So I hope you keep her message in mind too, to seek out some people who do that, and that can make a difference. Yes.
This was kind of a lesser important question, but having done it for so long and seen so many CVs and all that, what is the most professional looking font that you prefer to read over? It doesn't get tiring or confusing or jumbled?
Like I say that I like Times or Times New Roman, but like for example, I don't like Arial narrow. Things get really, because why I say I bring this Arial narrow, this is a typical things that when people want to clean lots of information on one page or 2 page, you can gain about half page size by going from Times New Roman to Arial narrow, basically, especially if you go to 11. So it's gonna be fitting everything, but, so, again, like, my personal preference is easy for me to, but, just my preference.
Legible, it's gotta be legible. They-
Legibility, I think, is the big
12
thing.
font, let's push
But
12
look
font.
at Arial narrow or some
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
things, then,
Yeah.
or Helvetica narrow, some of those things, really, to
I
me
agree
is.
with Times New Roman. The Times, I do, I agree with you with that.
See, and I would disagree, because I like the blockier things, like Arial or Calibri, or, see, there's another square one. I like them, I think they're much easier to read than the ones with the little curly cues on the ends of the letters and that kind of stuff.
One of the things I think affecting is the spacing, because, again, that's why I said print it. When you print a single space, sometimes, again, it gets too crowded for me, for my eyes. I like to have a little bit spacing so I can see better. So that's why I really want a printed version to be looked at.
You're not saying that like old people are looking at the CVs and.
Well,
But it's true.
Yes.
You know, when you're applying to a department, odds are there are people that have older eyes that are looking at it. That's, you know, the clearer it is, the easier it is to see.
I have my glasses, you have glasses, there's a reason for it. And it's gonna happen to you
That's
after
right.
40s, so it's gonna happen, don't worry.
Question?
Well, I kind of wanted to add to that. In my undergrad, we also did workshops on just the design of your resume. So not necessarily everything goes in, but to like include white space, especially like down the side. That way it's not like too cluttered, and that way people can write notes all over it. Because if they see something and they like it, like allow them the opportunity to be like, oh, that's amazing, instead of just like trying to remember it because there's no space to like scribble on your stuff.
So I've read a lot of guidelines, but I just want to know professionally
Yeah.
what looks the best to them.
It's
Yeah.
definitely not the time to squeeze everything in small places, right? You do want to make sure they can find what you've done.
Yeah.
They can read it clearly, so it's, make it legible.
Another thing that I personally don't like, people use a lot bold and italic to emphasize things, but so many bold or so many italic sometimes on the one page. So really, if you are gonna using bold and italic to emphasize, just use for things you wanna emphasize. I hope that it's not so many things to emphasize on one page. Because, I mean, then you have regular font, italic, bold, and for me, and also realize that in some applications, really, like a department, let's say, receive 100 faculty positions. Don't think that people will have days to study each of the CV or resumes, you know. They will quickly go through, and so therefore any kind of things that will create confusion, difficulty to read, understand, and so forth, they will go to the next one quickly, basically. So you don't want to lose your chances for such a bulk reviews.
One of the things I'll mention that, I don't know if it fits here, but it kind of came up a couple times in there, is, you know, early on, Tanju mentioned having a kind of a common mega CV that has all the information in it and cut and paste. Cutting and pasting is really scary, right? Because you can add, you can duplicate stuff, you can cut things out that you think are in there. And so I'd be, you know, make sure you have somebody else look at it to make sure that everything that you want to be in it or not be in it is that right, the way you want it. And I think that's especially true on cover letters. You probably won't believe, but it's amazing how many cover letters come in applying for a job at Clemson University that'll say, I'm applying for this entomologist position at Auburn. And you go, you're at the wrong school here, buddy, you know.
You're done for that one.
Yeah, that's, you know, when you have 100 applications to look through, if there are typos somewhere, that, you know, they go fast. And so I'd be really careful. It was easier, although it was harder work, when we had typewriters. Because you had to type what you really wanted it to say. You know, and if you were sending it to Clemson, you said Clemson. If you're sending it to Auburn, you said Auburn. You know, but cutting and pasting, you know, you change something and you forget that, you know, Auburn was in that letter 3 times and you only changed 2 to Clemson. But they show up, you see them every time, pretty much every search.
Like again, this is my own personal style, but when I prepare some important documents or paper or application, I'm an early person. When I look at like at 7 a.m. before I really basic kicks in for me, that's the time I really review all my important things and important papers. Like if you prepare a CV and if everything's in good shape, I will say, let it, sit there and then wake up in the morning, take your coffee, and then, maybe because of my age, restart your brain and then look at the game. And I can assure you, you'll find things that you didn't see before.
Are there any big, like, no-nos to writing CVs or any things that you've seen before that, people probably shouldn't have included, anything like that?
I had a professor who put his picture on it, and he was handsome. I mean, so I understand it. But I was always sort of, that's a no-no to me. You shouldn't do that. I don't see that. But once in a while, there'll be a unique one, and his certainly was. And I thought, goodness. So don't for a minute stop to think of putting your picture on your CV. I'm seeing it, but don't do it.
The other thing that kind of bugs me occasionally is personal information. And people talk about their family, and they'll list that, they're married and they have 6 children and 8 grandchildren, and, that just seems out of place.
I agree. I mean, like, just place whatever is necessary for the job and don't overkill it. What I don't like personally, finding things in CV that are not correct. That's really a big red flag for me because, like, I don't know, like, some credentials. For example, you apply for a job, you say, I know mass spec, I can use GC mass spec, LC mass spec, ICP mass spec. Great, I need a mass spec specialist. And then you call the reference and you talk about the analytical person of that person. He said, yeah, he used our mass spec, but he only used GC mass spec. He didn't use LC mass spec or ICP mass spec. Well, now I worry because I was thinking that I'm getting my mass spec specialist to run my 3 machines, and now the reference tell me he can only or he only work on a GC mass spec. So that says something that, so that's why sometimes you see long list of the software knowledge, long list of because think that when they hire you for a job, they might ask you some of those things. And what you say at that time, oops, sorry, I'm not sure about that. So therefore, please, my recommendation is that list your facts, your skills that you are capable, that you will deliver, and that will be good for everybody, I guess.
You already talked about mentioning relevant coursework, but let's say I'm applying for an engineering intern position and I'm just starting my master's program, so let's say I don't have a lot of work experience. In that case, can I mention maybe my academic projects or relevant coursework related to the field that I'm applying to?
Well, if you are competing for an entry-level position, since the positions are entry-level, of course, which means that these people really didn't have prior experience. So in that case, it will be normal that the people will not have the extent of work experience, but they will have internship or some other, or any other type of, small-scale work. I think it plays in the context of what type of position that you are applying. So, because this is the pool that you'll be competing against. And I don't think for an entry-level position, if someone come to me with lots of credentials, I'm not going to hire that person because he's overqualified for the job. So therefore, place your proper qualifications for the proper level of the job that you're applying. If it is proper what you are saying, that's good. I mean,
Any other questions? I have a question about dates. I've seen on different CVs, some of the dates are on the left, some are on the right, some are numbers, some are words. What is the proper way to utilize dates on the CV?
I don't know the proper one, but I will say whatever format that you adopt and use, make sure you use it throughout.
Mhm.
If you're going to use a certain pattern, stick with that pattern. Don't try to recreate it differently. Now, I do different listings of dates, whether I'm talking about presentations, it may actually have, for example, my format may call upon for months and days and years, but in publication it's different. So I follow my format for my style, my APA style would be what I would be using. So I think that matters, but for goodness sakes, for your format, be consistent. Don't change in midstream what you're doing, be consistent with what you're applying. But I don't know the right answer, maybe you guys know.
I don't think there's a right answer, it's just a preference.
Yeah,
that people-
consistency, I think, is the big
Consistency.
thing, yeah.
Like on mine is for my job and other things, everything, the dates or the year and the left. And the reason, again, my argument is that like a person quickly can see from my last job to earlier job, 2014, 13, whatever. So that's for the education and the jobs that I have. And the publication, I just follow a journal style. And then I use the same style for all publications. One caveat on that, like Clemson, our College of Engineering and Science has a specific CV format for our tenure and promotion packages. And if you look at that, in fact, that's not consistent. In terms of the like publication has a different style, like journal name, volume number, page number, and so forth. Conference presentation has a different style. Books has a different style. I guess manuals has a different style. So that's the CV of the Clemson University. So I ended up changing most of my resume to that style for the convenience purposes. But I still, to the best I can, try to keep a separate one if I want a job application for consistency. Because Clemson University doesn't have a consistent one. So.
I have a question for the graduate school. I went in to look at the different tools and the resources for graduate students. And I needed to set up an account, and I didn't do that, but there's a sign in place. What sort of resources do we have for our graduate students that they may want to know about?
Different resources across campus or different resources in the graduate school?
Yeah, are there different professional tools on the graduate school website that graduate students might, kind of the professional development piece? Do we have that developed for them yet, or something we might work on in the future?
We are working on it. Under the professional development tab, we list out all of our events. And this is one of the faculty of the future events, so it's more geared towards academic careers, whereas the GROW graduate readiness workshops are more geared towards a broader audience. We have a SAP program for graduate assistants, and that is like counseling and legal aid and things like that. It's very similar to Clemson's EAP program. But in terms of like online resources, we are working towards getting that together. There are a lot of resources for graduate students at Clemson. It's just very difficult to find them. And so what I'm trying to do is actually act as a clearinghouse and pull them all together.
Right.
So for any event that a student is looking for, they can go to our Google Calendar and they can see all events that are not just for the graduate school, but events across the campus that are professional development related. And I'm also happy to speak with anybody or help point them in the right direction should they have any questions about where they can find a tool or a resource.
Because I really liked a couple of sites I visited. The Purdue for Al, oh my gosh, I go to that for so many different things. But also the University of Minnesota, I thought had some really good support tools, particularly for curriculum vita development and such. So yeah, we can just Google so many things and come up with a lot of different answers, but knowing which ones may be the best. And it might give us an opportunity to be able to pick from and link to some really good outlets.
And
So.
yeah, our website is actually changing currently. We just hired somebody in the spring, so we're getting a complete overhaul of the graduate school's website. So you will be able to find more resources. the Career Center has a lot of resources that are online. They also have a CV online workshop that you can watch. It's an Adobe workshop with a voiceover. And I'm also going to be sending you a packet of information about CV writing that has a bunch of tips and information. So Clemson does
That's
have a lot of these resources. Like I said, they're kind of scattered. So hopefully in the future they will be streamlined and brought together.
Great, sounds like good news.
Do you guys have any other questions?
This is related to CVs with the advent of like LinkedIn and sites like that. Would you say the same rules apply for the types of things you want to put on your professional presence online, as far as the same strategies and tips you've already given us for CVs, for the content?
I think LinkedIn allows you to insert a profile, like your cover letter in one sense. So to tell the audience who you are and what you have been doing. The other part of the LinkedIn is pretty much set that you just enter your information, but you don't have, like, I don't think you can upload your CV, can you?
We can.
Can you? Okay, so maybe I don't know that, but anyway, because most of the thing I've seen with LinkedIn is just categories that you enter your data and then it shows the audience basically. But it is a tool that headhunters and recruiters use heavily these days. So therefore, you should watch your LinkedIn. If you have anything on LinkedIn, keep up with it. Don't let it, go down with time or remove it. So.
And that is an appropriate place to have a picture, is LinkedIn. They
Yes.
definitely, you can definitely have a picture there.
I have one question. So in terms of a working experience, so should I, in this, all the work that I have ever done before, or I select, only those the things that I want to highlight in my CV? So what do you suggest?
If you don't have your space limitation, and if you're applying to an academic position, I think as long as the items are not really minor items, so show all the experience that you have, so that you'll be able to present yourself well. But if you are talking about 2-page limit, then you automatically need to pick the most relevant one. But normally when we look at the job application for a new tenure track faculty position, we get 5-6 pages CVs where more detail provided. But I would put very trivial things like I took this course, or so anything that will show that will give some credentials to you, some expertise, like if you attend a specialty workshop to get a certificate or something, that's perfectly fine. But if you take a course, unless it's very unique, it's already on your transcript, so there's not too much value in my opinion.
And I think that, to me, I think that evolves over time, as a new PhD looking for a position, whether it's a postdoc or whatever. I think that's an important sales point to show the breadth of stuff that you've done. After you've been in academics for 5, 6, whatever years, and you decide you want to look someplace else, you really probably want to focus on those 5 or 6 years and maybe a little bit of grad school kind of things, because they're going to be looking then at your academic credentials, not, over the life history kind of thing. So it shifts a little bit over time. So as a new PhD going out or a new master's student going out, I think, you can probably put in more of that work kind of experience and certificates and those kind of things. And that probably pares down as you gain more academic experience and move around once you're in academia.
And you've won awards, list awards. Different
Definitely.
types of honors awards you have, make sure you have an area for that particular.
Also, if you had some, social activities or events or leadership roles, like you serve as a president of a student organization or some clubs or something that shows that you have been involved in community services in a really reasonable way. I think this shows your networking abilities, professional connections, and also, you know, your social skills, communication and so forth. So some of those things also are really good to add, I would say. You have something more?
Oh, no, it's one thing. Should I list the rewards like on like the front page? Like, would that make more impact or,
I'm going to probably say no.
you know?
But, you know, you're gonna put, again, tailoring it to the position and
Yeah.
what they may be looking for. So let me use academic job for a minute as faculty. So it really is gonna be your teaching research service types of pieces on there. But then you're gonna have a place that maybe it comes on page 3 or the beginning of page 4, where you highlight any awards. It's still important, but it's something for a distinction piece. Again, having its own heading so that it's pulled out and it's noticeable, but that definitely is, I wouldn't put it up front, would you? I mean, that's my gut reaction for that, because
No,
that
you-
placement's a good question, but,
Yeah, you typically see it toward the end,
yeah.
you know. Kind of, you know, hit them, you know. They read through all this other stuff,
And,
they go, oh my.
and
look
your
at all these things
professional
they done."
organizations is in that area too.
Yeah,
Definitely, you know, definitely, like, for example, you see the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, which is very prestigious. It has a very, I mean, those really should, I mean, not, again, at the top, but should be maybe after publication or so forth. So if you really have something, national level awards that you would like, you can bring a little bit up in the listing, but they definitely should be there.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you guys so
It's
much.
been a great
for-
group.
There's probably some more food, so make sure that you will take food with you, cookies. If you have any questions for me, my email is kdufflo@hudson.edu.
He knows what we are doing, but
I'm happy to
that's how we look at it.
help answer any
Curious, right?
Oh, yes, and then we're going to.
Send it to Tangier.
Does this
Never exactly get the answer to my question though, because
when you put pictures down?
regarding to evidence, and if you contact the employer, I'm asking how to list that association.
I haven't figured out.